People often say to me, you're reading off a teleprompter, right? Or you've got someone professional in the room. They're filming you, right? Yeah, hate to break it to you guys, but it's just an iPhone on a tripod, on a table with a microphone. I'm in this room all by my lonesome self. It's also lonely. No, the reality is, whilst I usually turn up with a general idea about what I want to talk about in the introduction, I literally make the rest of the video up on the spot. The reason why it comes across as being quasi sort of professional is because I know my stuff. I live and breathe this stuff day in and day out. Yeah, today's topic isn't one of those topics. I've been meaning to record this video for probably the last 4 or so weeks, and I just keep putting it off and off and off because I don't feel like I yet have a good grasp on this topic. It's not something that I can get up here and just start talking about fluidly. So, unfortunately, I've realized I can't keep putting it off. I think this content does need to get out there. So, today we're going to talk about it. I'm finally going to bite the bullet. What is it? I can hear all of you going, come on, come on. It's height. Yep, I can hear the building designers and the architects out there just groaning right now. We as an industry have really struggled with this concept for probably the last 3.5, almost 4 years, since City Plan 2014 came into effect. Well, in today's video, we're going to talk a bit about the history, the why, how we got to this point. And then we're going to focus on some recent, I'm not going to call it changes because nothing has changed, but some clarifications that have come through in terms of the definitions and how that impacts on you and your next design. So if that sounds like it's something that's up your alley, and I'm telling you now, it is, stick around. Okay, so if you guys were stuck around to the end of any of my videos before, you would have seen me in a unicorn onesie talking about the fact that the views expressed in these videos are my own. They're not council's. Never has that been more critical than today. In this video, everything I'm going to say is my take on the situation. It's not council's position on the situation. I really need to stress that. Okay, so now we've got the red tape out of the way, let's get into it. Let's start with the why. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm a massive why person. I need to understand why something was created, why we're going down this path before I can embrace it. Otherwise I just sit there and go, yeah, no, I'm not moving. I'm not taking it on board. So and I know this is probably going to scar people, but roll with me here. I like to think of the planning scheme as kind of like a love child between the council strategic town planners and the local councillors. I know, I'm scaring people right now. Just work with me. Okay, so the strategic town planners are more focused on the good for the city as a whole, whereas the local councillors are more focused on public opinion and the community's expectations. So they both go into like this negotiation process, and what comes out with the love child is the planning scheme. Now, back when City Plan 2014 was in production, in development, the strategic town planners sat there and they said, we want to increase the height limit. We want to go from 8.5 metres to 9.5 metres in height. 2 main reasons that they wanted to do that. Number one, we'd experienced the 2011 flooding. So council was under a lot of pressure to allow developments to go up to get above that flood level. Also, council was often being bullied into a position of accepting reduced roof pitches or less traditional outcomes in character areas because of height reasons. So people were essentially sitting there saying, yeah, we'd love to provide you a nice pitched roof, 27.5 degrees, something really cute, but we haven't got the height. We simply can't do it, guys. So council, like I said, they sat there and said, we want that extra bit. We want to go from 8.5 to 9.5 to get the bottom up and also to allow for more traditional roof forms. The councillors sat here and said, well, at the moment, 8.5, generally speaking, can only accommodate 2 levels, 2 floors, 2 stories, whatever you want to call it. However, when you go up to 9.5, that little bit extra suddenly means that you can accommodate another level. Now, members of the public don't have the same height perception as members of the industry, so building designers, architects. Give yourselves credit there. You've gone through uni, you've done TAFE, whatever you've done to get to the point you're at today, and you obviously have some creative natural ability. Members of the public don't have that. So when they turn up and they see a building, let's use an example here, a 10.5 metre high building that is 2 stories, and over here they see a 9.5 metre high building that is 3 stories, they're going to view that one as being much bigger than this one here, because they can only interpret or read the buildings based on the horizontal banding. So the local councillors said, we're under a lot of pressure here to combat, I guess is the right word, the bulk and scale of developments across the city. Our constituents are complaining non-stop about the height of development. We can see why you want to go up. We can see why you want to go from 8.5 to 9.5. They're valid reasons. However, we can see we're going to open this massive can of worms. We're going to open ourselves to ongoing complaints, barrage of people just whinging, that's probably a negative word, unhappy, that's probably a more positive word, with this outcome. So what we want to try and do is balance that. How do we do that? We want a story limit. So under City Plan 2000, we had the height limit was simply 8.5 metres. What came out with City Plan 2014 was a height limit of 9.5, strategic town planners got their way, and a story limit of 2 stories. Councillors got their way. So they both sort of won, but at the end, yeah, wasn't the best outcome. But anyway, let's move on. We as an industry all sat there and thought, yeah, this won't last. Yeah, local councillors will see how problematic this outcome is. They'll eventually concede, the town planners will end up winning, we'll end up getting that story thing removed, it'll all be sweet, maybe 6 months, maybe 12 months. Yeah, we were wrong. We were oh so wrong. What are we, almost 4 years down the track now? And not only is it still here to stay, but it has tightened and tightened and tightened. It is ridiculous. So I think we finally need to concede that that 2-story height limit is here to stay. So on most residential sites across the city, you're no longer allowed to go over that 2-story height limit. So that's the why. Like I said, it was trying to combat public issues that they could see coming up and the additional issues that they could see coming about from that extra 1 metre of height. So you got that? You cool? Now, let's move on and let's focus on the definition of story, because that's what I really want to talk about today, because that's where we have seen a lot of changes in recent times. And I do stress, a lot of this, again, I mentioned in the intro, I'm not going to use the word change because nothing has actually changed in the wording of the planning scheme. But what councils realised is there was differences of opinion when it comes to the interpretation of the definition. And they've now sat down and gone, okay, let's just clarify how we are interpreting it and how it should be interpreted going forward. And that information's only really come to light in last 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So firstly, no roof. A story is a space between a floor and the floor above. Or if there is no floor above, the floor and the ceiling above. So in this situation here, do you like my little pre-person? That's basically supposed to represent an uncovered roof deck. In this situation, there is no floor above and there is no ceiling above. So that one there is not counted as a story, whereas that is a story and that is a story right there. So to be a story, you need a roof, or a roof in terms of like a floor or a ceiling. If you don't have that, it's not a story. There's one little loophole, that still exists. Go for your life there if you really want. Next thing I'll clarify is a story is a space, like I just said, between a floor. So where's another example? Let's come over here. We had a job out at, I think it was Nunda, going back a couple of years ago now when this definition first came in. And in that situation, we had a slab, we had maybe 1.5 between the ground and the lower side of the floor. The reason why we had that 1.5 was for flooding purposes. So basically we need to allow the water to continue to flow through. We said to council, that 1.5, it's not habitable. It's not tall enough for anyone actually to use that space. And because of the flooding restrictions, people can't actually store any stuff down there. It cannot actually legitimately be used. Council turned around and said, no, unfortunately, because you've got a slab down there, which we put down there to stop erosion, it is technically classed as a floor. So therefore, that 1.5 metre high section is technically a story. Sounds crazy, I know, but when you look at the wording, I can see how council comes to that conclusion. But you can actually use that to your advantage. Flip it the other way. If you kept the ground there and you didn't actually put a sealed surface down, then hey, there's technically no floor. Again, I go back to the fact, a story is a space between one floor and the floor above, or a floor and a ceiling. If there is no floor, it is not a story. Now, I have had some creative building designers say to me in the past, what if we just bring in a little bit of dirt? What if we just shove a little bit of dirt across the slab? Then it's now ground. Yeah, I think most certifiers, they're not that stupid, guys. They're gonna work out there's a slab underneath there, and unfortunately they're gonna have to sit there and say it's a story. Good try, but yeah, nah, not gonna fly. So that's that one. Okay, Next thing I want to talk about is basement. Now, storey excludes basements. Basement is a structure that sticks no more than 1 metre out of the ground. We, until recently, and when I say recently, again, I'm going to stress the last month, this is how recent this stuff is, always used to say, okay, well, if you've got no more than 1 metre between that point and that point, then this portion here is classed as a basement. So you have basement, storey 1 and storey 2. And then over here, that's not classed as a basement because it obviously sticks more than 1 metre above our ground level, but we don't have additional stories above, so you know more than 2 stories at any point. Again, basement, not a story, storey 1, storey 2, no roof, so it's not a story. Story, but nothing above. Sweet. Now we came to that conclusion because if you actually look at the definitions, it says only a basement. So we went, okay, only that portion that is a basement gets excluded from the definition. Council has clarified now that that was kind of a misinterpretation. You can only exclude the basement if that is the only thing on that level. So in this situation, we would have had that as the basement, but that as a garage. Because that is linked to that, it's in the same space as that, unfortunately, it can't be excluded. It's not classed as a basement. So that's a big thing because we've got so many applications through using that interpretation there. Like I said, council's come to realise that people were all interpreting things differently, and they've now come up with this consistent single interpretation, and it says that if that basement is in the same space as another use, or another, use is probably the right word, on that floor, on that level, then unfortunately it can't be excluded for the purpose of the definition. Now, basement top, just looking ahead just to see where I'm going to go with you. You can see I've got my cheat sheets. Like I said at the beginning, this is a new topic for me. Okay, basement. The other thing I want to clarify here is, that's right, okay, space. So when you look at the definition of basement, like I just said before, it talks about the fact that it can't be in the same space. We tried to get a little bit creative with this one on another job, but apparently another town planner did, so we're not the only ones out there. What we tried to do was we created an area that we said was the basement, and then we put about 40 centimetres of dirt in there, and then we had the rest of the level. So we basically said because it's separated by 40 centimetres of dirt, it's not in the same space. You literally had to go out the basement area, around, and then into the other area. They were not linked in any way, shape or form because it's not the same space. Therefore, we can basically exclude it from the definition. Council's now come back and unfortunately they've squashed that idea. They've turned around and said no, to be at the same space means at the same level. So if it's at the same height, or height's probably a bit too specific, we don't want to use that word, the same floor, then it's the same space. So it doesn't matter if they're not physically linked to each other. If it's at the same floor, it's the same space. Keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go. Okay, next one. Council has clarified that it is a space between floors. We were trying to argue at one point, again, give us credit, we were trying here. We were trying to argue that the space could be measured to the underside of the floor. So we basically said your ground level to your underside of the floor, no more than 1 metre. We're sweet. Council again has now come back and clarified that their interpretation is to take it from the top side of the floor. So in the situation we had recently, that added an extra 30 centimetres between the bottom of the floor and the top of the floor. So the bottom of the substructure, or the bottom of the floor structure, and the top where all the tiles and floorboards go, was about 30 centimetres. That 30 centimetres took us from being under the 1 metre threshold to being over the 1 metre threshold. Suddenly we didn't qualify. So what we needed to do was essentially lower the building into the ground to suddenly make it qualify. So again, I stress, when you're measuring that 1 metre for the purpose of the basement exclusion, it needs to be to the top side of the floor. Now, next stairs. Same sort of theory as what we've been talking about with the basements here. For a while there, a storey excludes stairs, or the wording says something along the lines of only stairs. So what we were doing, similar to here, was in this situation here, we were going, okay, well that's only stairs, that's only stairs, that's only stairs. Storey 1, storey 2, storey 1, nothing above, nothing above. We're no more than 2 stories at any point. Council has now clarified again, it's only a space that is only used for the purpose of stairs that gets excluded. So in this situation, the stairs are associated with that bottom story, those stairs are associated with that story, and those stairs are associated with that story. So technically we have 1, 2, 3 stories because the stairs can't be excluded because they're in association with other areas on that floor. So really, to try and get stairs to work on a sloping site now, you have to look at something like this. Keeping in mind, stairs, floor, or stairs, story, stairs, story, stairs, stairs, story. So no point do you have three of those overlapping. I know, I can see you guys are just going, oh, what? So yeah, we're now going to have to, if you want to comply with the height limit, which I'm going to be honest with you, you do need to comply with the height limit. You're pretty much wasting your time and your effort and your money 99% of the time trying to lodge an application to push the height limits. You need to move from this sort of concept to this concept over here. Now, next thing, voids. Okay, so what we've talked about here covers off like the current state of play, all of the little quirks that we've got going on. What I want to now talk about is future changes, things that I see coming on the horizon. So, essentially, voids. It's the first thing I just suddenly saw my battery low going on. I'm like, no, don't die on me. Stick with me. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is voids. At the moment, this situation here where you've got story 1, story 2, with nothing above because you want to get some beautiful light through, that is classed as 1 story and 2 stories there. Happy days. Council's been bitten a little bit recently by people who have come in and after the fact, they've gone and built the floor through there and created a 2nd story, which in this situation, hey, 2-story limit, it's okay. But in the situations where council's come across, it's been a 3rd story situation. So people have gone in, got approval on the basis that it's only going to be 2 stories plus a void. And then later on, they've come in and filled in that sort of area afterwards. Well, let's be real, it's all intentional. But unlawfully created an extra story. So I can see some changes on the horizon. I can see maybe not in the next month, but maybe the next 6 to 12 months, council's going to amend the definition to try and close that loophole. I personally have no idea how they're going to do it. It's going to be very, very hard in terms of coming up with the right wording, but that I can see will be their intention to close that loophole. So be ready for that. Next thing, ground level. Okay. At the moment, it is no more than, your 1 metre is measured for the purpose of the basement again, off ground level. Ground level as defined by city plan in super, super simple terms is the original landform. So the pre-cut, pre-fill landform. This often results in a situation where people come across and they cut down there and it means that the neighbour or anyone in the street is actually viewing 3 stories. So whilst it technically stacks up, it technically complies with council's requirements, it doesn't actually meet the intent behind the requirements. Again, if we go back to local councillors, they're trying to reduce the amount of horizontal banding that people see, the number of levels that people see. So measuring it off the original ground level doesn't always match up with that intent. I can see council, again, maybe not in the next month, maybe the next 6 to 12 months, coming through and closing that loophole. I can see them saying basically no more than 1 metre above the original ground level, or ground level as defined by city plan, and or the finished ground level, whichever is lesser. So I can see them closing that loophole. So just be prepared for that. We can see some changes that are coming in the future. Now, lastly, I want to finish on this point. Most people that know me think of me as a calm, cool, collected type person. It takes a lot to really, really fire me up and irk me. This is one thing that really, really bothers me. When people say that they want to fight council based on principle. Okay, let me correct myself here. If you're the likes of Mirvac, Lend-Lease, you're doing 100 lot units or things like that, those massive sort of developments, totally different situation. We obviously deal with houses, house extensions primarily, the smallest sort of jobs. In those situations, fighting council on principle, which in other words essentially means taking them to court, so getting a refusal, appealing council's decision, is never in the client's best interest. It's never in your best interest. It's in no one's best interest. So firstly, the client. Yeah, sure. After 18 months, 2 years, the client might come out and go, yeah, I won against council. Yeah, that joy, that win factor is going to wear off in about 5 minutes. And when they turn around and go, yeah, the holding costs over the last 18 months to 2 years, they've killed me. I now can't afford to build that house. Even though the courts have turned around and said, hey, yeah, you can win. You can go ahead and build that house. They now can no longer afford to actually build that house. I'm telling you now, the 5 minutes of glory you get for sitting there saying you've won against council does not compare to the, what's the word I'm looking for? Dissatisfaction, the disenchantment, the whatever word you want to use with not being able to actually build your dream house. So that's the client's perspective. Your perspective, you don't get to see your design come to life because the client can't afford to build it. So again, sure, you can turn around and go, hey, I helped the client win against council. Big deal. If your design doesn't get off the ground, I think you end up being the one that's worse off than council. Finally, society. Everyone goes, oh, it's for the good of society. We'll suddenly make council stick to this proper interpretation. For example, instead of going to the instead of the top side of the floor, we got them to agree it's the bottom side of the floor. I can tell you now, if council gets burnt in court, they are very, very quick to close loopholes. In no time, they will go and amend that definition to ensure that no one else can utilise it in the future. They want to make sure that their intent is being upheld. So again, there is no win for society. So don't sit there and be a bit of a negative term here, but an idiot. Don't be an idiot and sit there and say, I want to fight council on principle. They should not be doing this. Yeah, you're going to lose. You're going to lose in so many different ways. It is not worth it. So, I made it. I made it to the end. That was a hard video, okay? Give me some credit there. Hopefully, my rambling today has made a bit of sense. If you've got any questions, add them below. I'm more than happy to provide feedback that way. Otherwise, as always, thanks for watching.
For all you red tape lovers out there, I have one thing to say. Well, no, actually, I've got three. Number one, the advice provided in these videos is general in nature. It's not site specific. You would be a silly Billy to go and make financial decisions based on this advice without first checking with the town planner. Don't be a silly Billy. Number two, Brisbane town planning is in no way linked to Brisbane City Council. The views expressed in these videos are my own, not council's. So if you don't like them, blame me, not council. Number three, what was my number three? Oh yeah, the views expressed in these videos are accurate at the time of recording. If you're watching this video back 10 years from now, the views may not be so accurate. That's all. Bye.